Oh, right before we went live.
Right before we went live. Welcome everyone to the Spoiler Room. Happy New Year. 2022 is here. It means a new season of the Spoiler Room. I realize I have done an episode every week for the last 2 years without a break. None whatsoever. And I'm going. I don't plan on stopping. And man, do we got a great year for you. We got our special lineup of horror of 1988, and Ian's talked me into doing more themed months. It's his fault, so you can blame him. So thank you for venturing down the stairs, pulling up the chair, and grabbing your favorite drink. And I got a little for talking spoiler movies, movie spoilers with us tonight. And it's 4 on the Floor month. We're covering horror films this month. And it's not always going to be horror films every month, but we're covering horror films this month, the 4th in a franchise. And I've got a great crew with me tonight to talk about the first film, which just happens to be out in 1988, but it's not officially a horror of 1988 episode. I know. Stay confused, folks. None other in this crew. We've got back in the spoiler room. We've got Michael with us. How you doing, Michael? Thanks for coming back. And it's so appropriate you're here for another Halloween film.
I was trying to... Hold on a second. Sure. I was trying to share the episode, and then I was hearing like double mark.
Oh, yeah. You don't want double mark.
Crap. Anyways, I'm doing well. This is my first episode of this year. I think I was only on one official episode last year, and then Patreon, I believe.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So, and the Patreon was us talking about Halloween, but Halloween, not that Halloween or the other Halloween, but the newest Halloween called Halloween.
Sort of
Halloween or Halloween Kills.
Oh, Halloween Kills. That's right.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Which I still don't think you like it, but I think I might have turned your mind just a little bit.
You moved the needle from all the way in the red to kind of in the yellow.
Oh, that movie was all the way in the yellow for me.
Yeah.
So it was more like the bodily fluid range. Sorry.
And yes, folks, those dulcet tones are none other than Mr. Ian Simmons. Hello, Ian. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Glad to have you once again here with us. You just keep coming back.
I'm glad to be here with the thematic coloring on the name badges. You're making great use of this streaming art. I'm a fan of that too.
I stole that from you because your great show there that you do with your live stream where you're covering right now, Mando. Yeah, I took your thunder away. You're covering Book of Boba. You do the colored theme, so I figured I'd try it. But yes,
it's a whole new world. I love it.
It is orange. It is January. What a perfect month to talk about horror.
Well, we got Scream coming out next week.
You got Scream coming out next week. So there is that. So yes, folks, we are talking Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. And Ian, you get a reprieve again. I want to have our good guest, Michael, here give the synopsis of Halloween 4, because I know you are a Halloween fan.
Yes. Okay. So Halloween 4 picks up, I would say, at least 8 years after the first two Halloweens, 8 or 9 years later, with some well-worn territory. Michael Myers survived the explosion of Halloween 2 somehow, and is being locked up again at a different sanitarium nearby Haddonfield. They are chock full of sanitariums. And with some amazing exposition down an elevator, we find out that he not only survived that explosion, as I said, but that he's been locked up here. Well, they're going to transport him. He escapes, but only after finding out that his flesh and blood sister, Laurie Strode, had a daughter. And at that point, he finds his killer rage. He kills everyone in the ambulance and walks his happy ass back to Haddonfield to finish what he had started.
Yeah, that's
off the top of my head.
Well said. Well said. I like that synopsis. That's a good one. You make it sound good. No, I kid. But Yeah, Halloween 4. This is one that's talked about where we were talking about it before the show. People seem to either really love this film or hated this film. Ian, where do you sit with Halloween 4? We'll get initial reactions before we dive into the film.
You know, in 1988, this was the year that I started having sleepovers with friends in school. Much like the spoiler room, felt like I was having a sleepover every week at someone's house. Like different, of my friends would host, and we'd rent horror movies on VHS and just like stay up till all hours watching stuff that we probably shouldn't have. I remember watching Halloween 4, and all me and my buddies were really impressed with it. We loved it. I've officially, having watched it again today, 30 some years later, grown out of this movie. It is not good. And partially, I think that's what I liked about it at the time was we were watching a lot of like really gory. This is like the late 80s. So it was like the over the top extreme unrated versions of horror slasher movies where you're seeing like blood and guts and everything. And this was, relatively understated aside from like a throat ripping, which comes really late in the proceedings. There's not a whole lot of really graphic material here.
No, so I think that comes in the next one. The next one's pretty gnarly.
Right. But I think that's what it was, kind of an oasis. It was something different that I responded to back then. But now I'm watching it. I'm like, what's the point of watching this? It's not scary. It's not suspenseful. It's not as artfully done as the original Halloween. And yet it's not as slashery, gorific, like, check this out, as some of the other slasher movies, even the other Halloween movies. So I'm just kind of like, it doesn't really move the needle for me, except for Loomis's Boyle. He was horribly burned in the same accident, and the first time you see him, he's got this giant fucking like polyp boil thing on his cheek, and first of all, it moves, and then it disappears, and then it reappears in a different place, and then it disappears altogether. That was the highlight of me. Was like, where's Loomis's Boyle?
Go ahead, Mike.
All things considered, I actually kind of like this film, but I'm not necessarily so. I think part of so I've often been considered a pretty lenient critic, and I think it's because I don't necessarily like. Being in film school, there was just so much negativity. There's like everything fucking sucked because people would they'd have one scale. Like, here's the greatest movie of all time. How is everything else compared to that? And I just think that's exhausting. Yeah. So like I kind of put each movie on its own scale and how I feel about it in that moment. So like in the plethora of cinema history, no, this is not a very good movie. But in comparison to the Halloween franchise, it's not bad. It fluctuates for me, and I think part of the reason why is I do have pretty fond memories of this movie, mainly because I have just terrible kinder trauma associated with it.
Oh, wow.
AMC used to do like before they showed nothing but Walking Dead during Halloween, they used to do a Halloween marathon every year,
right?
And they'd show 1 or 2 movies a night. And once again, you're flipping through channels and you're kind of watching through your hands and everything. Cause it's like, as a kid, I was fascinated by these movies, but they scared me. So like, I'd always watch it the volume off. And I feel like the 2 movies that I saw the most of flipping through the channels was this. And then the next one, 5. So I kind of like, they kind of run together for me. And no, compared to the original film, this movie is not very good. Like you said, it's not really gory. It doesn't really handle the suspense. I actually think the film is really good, if not, I don't want to say great, but I would say really good until we actually start until kind of like the third act, because like when Michael is just kind of seeing just little bits and pieces, it kind of works, and I like the look and the style they're going to for this film. But as soon as we have to interact with him and he's just fucking doing the robot through the entire film, it just doesn't work as well. Though it's funny. It's a very long thing I'm getting at. Everyone complains about teleporting Jason, but no one ever talks about teleporting Michael, and he does it at least a couple times in this film.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I like it. I think it establishes like the vibe and aesthetic that I like out of a Halloween film. I think Danielle Harris is really good, and the actress who plays her
Mhm.
her sister is also actually. I think all of the actors, for all things considered, are pretty good in this film. It's just it feels like just feels like it's too late
Yeah.
by this point. Like what you said, Ian. Why are we watching this film?
Mhm.
By the point 1988, who gives a fuck?
Yeah.
Well, I think honestly, and this is why it's something I can appreciate as an adult and not necessarily as a kid, but the last Halloween movie before this had been about like what 5 years earlier with
Mhm.
Halloween 3: Season of the Witch,
Which
Right.
I
which is a lot. It's beloved by a lot of people. I haven't watched it long enough to remember how I feel about it as a movie, but I love the concept of the movie itself, and also what it meant for what would have been the vision for the Halloween franchise. Doing something a little different, making more of an anthology series. But in the late 80s, everything was coming back around. Like Nightmare on Elm Street was, chugging along, putting out sequels, Friday the 13th. So they're like, hey, look, we've got this Halloween. Let's bring back Michael Myers, the return of Michael Myers. So they put out this movie that is almost sort of a requel of the original Halloween, because a lot of the beats are very much the same. You've got the, he escapes from the sanitarium, granted by ambulance, but there's also a bit where I think he kills a mechanic in the first movie, and you see the gown and the kind of the brambles off the, in the extreme foreground of the scene. There's just a lot of stuff that's repeated, and then at the end, this kind of house siege. It's not nearly as tension filled as it was, where it's just like the babysitter with the two kids in the house. It's like the sheriff and the dumb teenagers. You're just kind of waiting for the body count to continue.
The house siege should have been a lot cooler,
Mhm.
and it's been done better. Hell, in this own franchise, honestly. But no, you hit something right on the head. Like, while all a lot of the slasher sequels all kind of tread water and they do the same thing. Yeah, it almost feels like this one's trying to like remind you what this franchise is about, but in a very safe way. Because if you look at like what the other franchises were doing, I'm just doing a quick little Google search of what 1988 in horror looks like, and so you have Nightmare on Elm Street 4, which at this point they had that franchise hasn't completely gone off the rails yet, starting to. Friday the 13th Part 7. How crazy is that? The franchise that ripped off Halloween already has 7 sequels out at this point. And it's when you're watching it in the context of just watching these films, because usually it's very rare that I just like, let me just put in Halloween 4. Like usually if I'm watching, it's because I'm doing a rewatch of some sort, and then
Right.
you're
Sure.
watching them in context of each other. So it's not often that I'm thinking about like what else was going on in the world of horror films at that time, and this film's just feels so tame in comparison.
Well, also because you bring up I know I was talking about the sequels, and then you kind of bring out like what sequels were happening in 1988. And the key there is that 88 was The New Blood, Friday the 13th, Part 7, as you mentioned. That was where Jason fights, Carrie, the
I
the
love
girl
that
with the
one.
psychic powers, right?
I hate that one.
I love that one. I thought that one was great because it was different. It was like, holy shit, someone's standing up for,
I love it too. I realize there's a lot of problems with that movie, but it's also the film that gave us, the definitive Jason Kane Hodder. I love the makeup effects and all that stuff. Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master, that was picking up what the seeds that were planted in Dream Warriors and really blowing out the fantasy element.
And I still like that one. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's a great sequel. Hellraiser 2, Hellbound.
Was
taking
that
the
really 88?
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
88. Yeah.
So you're taking this very small concept of Hellraiser, horror in a house, and saying, okay, what does hell look like for these creatures? So you're taking these established, big money franchises that everybody loves, and doing what I always love it when franchises do, but rarely do nowadays, which is say, you've got guaranteed asses and seats. Don't do the same thing over again. Go crazy, really expand the imagination. Whereas Halloween 4 is we're just going to go back to the well and show you a not very good version of Carpenter.
Yeah, it was the same thing like you're saying, like even like Phantasm 2, which came out that year. They're like, let's take Phantasm and put it on the road. And they did something different. And like I said, well, like I guess part of the reason why I feel like I'm so lenient on Halloween 4 because I'm also thinking about what comes next, and it's a fine Halloween slasher.
It's fine is the good word, especially. I mean, it is Halloween 1 compared to all the other sequels that we're getting from this point on.
Yeah, hell, I'd say mainly because I'm not a huge super fan of this one. I think it's at least on par with Halloween 2, which I don't think is as good as others claim it to be. I don't think it's bad, but I don't think it's nearly as good as the first one. I think it's actually kind of on the same level as Halloween 4, but that's just me.
I haven't seen Halloween 2 is the one I've seen least. I was actually going to try and fit it in to have that context, but I ran out of time. Mark, hey, welcome back to your show.
Hey, how you doing?
This is the Ian and Michael show now.
Not only that, but Ian is not only spoiling movies, but he's spoiling the rest of the season. Thank you very much for that. No, just kidding. No, this is
They didn't have to know that, Mark.
No, it's just this.
We could have talked the horror of 1988 while skipping over the biggest horror films of 88.
No, I'm just joking. This is a great opening for the season because this is part of the reason why I wanted to do the horror of 1988. We've covered a lot of horror from this year, and when I just did a Google search and Wikipedia look of it, I didn't realize, because when I was younger, I didn't really pay attention. You know, you don't pay attention, you just really pay attention to the year it comes out. I looked at the sheer volume of horror that came out this year, and you can see why, like you're saying, Mike and Ian both, that this is a fine slasher film. It just happened to come out during the saturation peak season of horror cinema. I mean, there was so much out there that it does come off as tame, to where if it came out at a time when there wasn't as much horror, maybe it would have been better received. I know, I honestly think, because a lot of these kills happen off screen, or they're in the shadows. You get bloody bodies, but they're in the shadows, kind of. They're not really out. You're right. All the actors in here, that's what surprised me, is watching this again, because I haven't watched this in ages. Performances here are fine. And for a very young actress, Danielle Harris is actually really good in this for a young actress in a horror movie, or just in a movie in general, to where she's not the main star, but she's still one of the key featured characters in here. I guess for me, the one thing that I'm like, why did the whole idea of Laurie Strode being Michael's sister, I've never quite agreed with. I've always thought that was an odd angle, and they try to justify it in here a little more with, Danielle. She easily could have been Mike Myers' niece, and just don't say who her mother was. It was just maybe another relative of Mike Myers. It doesn't really matter. We don't know at this point the full family tree of the Myers family, so it could, who knows, he maybe had another sibling. But the minute she shows the picture of Jamie Lee Curtis, and you're like, she's crying because she's remembering her mom, I'm like, oh yeah. But what's more funny about this is watching this again. There's a scene, folks, and we're going to be jumping around here. I mean, there's a scene later on where the townsfolk go nuts. They decide to go out and find out why no one's answering the phone at the cop shop.
I was hoping you were going to bring this up.
They drive up, literally, and they're standing in front of the cops, and I'm like, this all seems so very familiar. And literally, one of the guys says, we're going to go get him. And
Evil dies tonight.
I'm glad I'm not the only one. Literally in my head, I'm like, someone say Evil dies tonight, because but it's not just.
I was sitting there watching, like, oh, man, Mark's going to hate this movie.
No, but it was funny is watching this. I'm like, this is nearly not quite beat for beat, but Halloween Kills is very similar to this movie in many ways, at least the beats. You got more of the town involved, which we didn't really have in the first Halloween. You've got the niece, he's still coming back, he's going back to the house. I mean, there's a lot of beats in here that felt familiar. One of the things I liked, but I think in the hands of a better director, no offense to this director, I think he does fine with the material he's given, but
that's my complaint too. Yeah.
There's a wonderful scene in here that I was hoping they'd have a little more done. So the townsfolk are going out on their lynch mob looking for Mike Myers. They come upon a park with a gazebo. Phil, it's a gazebo. Next to the gazebo, there's bushes that are moving, and one of them thinks they saw Mike Myers in the bushes.
Yeah.
So they unload RoboCop style into the bushes. I mean, these guys just keep firing.
Oh, my favorite part, just the lead up to that, was that they're driving like a block and a half down. He taps on the top. Rue's like, he's over there. It's like, how do you see this bush moving from over there, dude? I'm watching on a 55-inch TV, and right next to it, I barely saw it.
And so they unload into the bushes, and then they go up to the bushes. Afterwards, they go, oh, that's so and so. Oh. And they move on. They're just like, oh, they just killed an innocent person in the bushes. Oh well, okay, let's move on.
There's a scene I want to talk about because it's I jokingly said on my Letterboxd review that it just feels like pure cinema, but that's just me being just a contrarian. I want to talk about the scene in near the beginning of the film at the gas station where Loomis shows up and sees him, and despite this is actually a scene I kind of like because it's like their first like little meeting together. And Loomis pulls out the gun and puts out like 6 shots and he's just gone. Like, at what point did you not see him walk away or that he wasn't there? Like we don't see Michael run away and like, were you already shoot? Like, I don't know. But my favorite part about that entire scene is not the fact that Michael just disappears. I just love that. I imagine it was a conversation between the director and the producer where they're like, I don't know, we're shooting in Colorado. Are people going to believe this is Illinois? I don't know. Let's put a bunch of pictures of Abraham Lincoln on the wall behind him. And it's all like the same 3 pictures. They're just like rotated and look in the different direction. And I was like, yeah, that feels like a producer decision. It almost feels like when you're watching a movie made by an Italian director and they're trying to make Italy look like America, so they just put American flags everywhere.
Yeah,
that's kind of what this felt like.
Go ahead, Ian.
No, that shot is very strange because there is that really crazy, like fast zoom in on Michael Myers as you see him standing in the kitchen. He's wearing the jumpsuit that he's taken from the mechanic, but his head is still all bandaged up. So it's almost an optical illusion. You're like, is he wearing the mask? Where did he get the mask? But no, it's just bandages. But then when Loomis pulls out the gun and shoots, Myers disappears. You're right. But the shot that they used to indicate that he has disappeared from that background is like this weird close-up of dishes, which I don't even know where those were in the background related to Michael Myers. It felt like it was almost like a close-up of the wall that was 18 feet behind him. Like, I don't know. I'm not sure what was going on there, but he was the shape at this point. So he's not Michael Myers really. He can just like disappear.
They're already hinting at the whole the whole paranormal type of thing at this point in this frame. You can see it hitting where he just suddenly disappears, and then of course we obviously get it later on.
Well, honestly, like what was taking me out of the film, this most recent watch, Mark, on the Halloween Kills episode, one thing I was talking about that I actually kind of appreciated about Halloween Kills was that it's the first time since like the very first film that Michael Myers felt like Michael Myers. He felt like he was like moving like the character, probably because Nick Castle came back and played him, but they also had another guy playing him too. So they mimicked each other's movements very well. It was painful because this is one thing that always bothered me about Halloween 2, and it's even worse in this one, where the actors who are playing Michael don't fucking move at all. They just like a fucking stoic. It's almost like every time we see Michael standing there, it's like, did they just put a dummy in overalls? It's not until he moves they're like, oh, that's a person. Well, like, I mean, there's no characteristics to his movements, to his body, and it's dull. Like it's that's what I was saying. Like when he's the looming threat, or it kind of works, but like once you see him in these action scenes and just. It just feels like a guy who's never been on camera before having to move, but they're all stunt people. That's all they do is fight on camera.
Well, that's literally the case. And the confrontation with the pickup truck in the end that kind of sends him flying back over the hole that will conveniently send him down to the mine. I mean, we talked about the shitty dummy. That's what we got in this. But I will agree with you, even to the point where that scene where Rachel and Jamie are climbing on the roof to get away from Michael Myers. They're like scrambling, Jamie is on Rachel's back and they're like trying to crawl over these panes. Michael Myers is just like standing and walking like he's got anti-gravity boots.
Yeah.
But even the way he's walking, it's this weird kind of like stilted, planting one foot very deliberately. His body movements are very jerky. It's almost like he's trying to avoid, like he's drunk and trying to avoid throwing up.
It almost feels like it's a person who, like a stunt guy who's not really much of an actor, who is trying to recreate something, but maybe is not very well not super familiar with it. It's kind of like how my mom, any dude in a mask is Jason. He's like, well, these guys don't move very much, and they're stoic. Like they, probably saw like a Friday the 13th movie. But yeah, I'm just gonna stand there and it'll be good.
Yeah, I want to touch really quickly on the Halloween Kills thing, because I think this movie does what pretty much everything thematically that Halloween Kills is trying to do, but 10 times better. Part of that, and I'm not saying that it was executed that well. I think you could still, make a little bit stronger, but part of the reason is it's only 10 years later. The folks of Haddonfield dealt with this thing 10 years ago, as opposed to like 40 years ago in the new movie. And also, because they didn't wipe out the continuity of Halloween 2, it makes more sense why the town will be traumatized by this Michael Myers guy. In Halloween Kills, he was a guy that 40 years ago killed 3 people. In this movie, because they acknowledge Halloween 2, which I guess they upped the body count by 13, they say, yeah, he killed 16 people 10 years ago. That's angry, drunken mob, going out with shotguns material.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was ultimately my biggest complaint with, and I also should specify, I like both of the new Halloween movies. I think they are significantly better than some of the Halloween sequels, but like that was my big complaint with the first of the 2 new Halloweens. Like, okay, I get Laurie's got a lot of trauma built up inside of her, and I get why she's she's afraid and all this. But what doesn't make sense is Michael going after her still. If we remove that sister element, like her being afraid, her struggling, her not quite getting past it makes sense. It's not only survivor guilt, but it's trauma. I can buy all that. Michael going after her, even with, Sartain or whatever, guiding her there, makes no sense. Without that connection. As much as I hate that connection in 2, it's the only thing that really motivates these sequels.
Well, can you either of you answer me this, because it's something I never quite understood. I mean, I guess the sister element was introduced in Halloween 2, and now it's carried forth in Halloween 4. Michael wants to kill his niece. Why does he want to kill his family? Did Loomis ever explain like what the deal was? Did he ever try and hunt down his parents and kill them? I don't understand what the connection is.
I
can make up I have like I just don't want to say make up. I think I could like try to explain one. He killed his sister. We all know that. In his childlike mind, I wouldn't be surprised if it was like him not necessarily separating the fact that it's a different sister, and he almost feels like, well, I didn't complete it the first time, I need to continue on. Once again, this is just me spitballing here. It's never explained. I feel like I feel like one could explain it, but no, it's not.
See, and that's what always got me with his motivation of, I could see coming back either to Haddonfield for just revenge or some weird,
just stalking the town, like makes sense.
Stalking the town or some weird connection to his family home. He's always killing people because he's just trying to get home. Because
they actually explained that Halloween Kills, and it's like they said that Halloween Kills. I'm like, oh shit, that's a really smart way to do it. He's just killing anyone who gets in his way going back home.
Right,
easy.
I'll actually take that over, him wanting to kill his family and his sister for whatever reason. It made sense in the first one because it set that establishment of, as much as people shit on horror films, many of them are morality plays. He kills his sister because his sister was sinning in their house, at least the way I picked up his motivation.
Sinner.
She's a sinner, and because it was a religious family, it's implied, and he kills her because I always took it as that she was, the whole slasher idea of they're sinning, he kills her. So his motivation for coming back and going after Lori, I always figured was maybe in the first ones, not that he was his, the sister, but just the babysitter that was protecting whatever the kid he wants to kill, or she was just in the way. I mean, the motivation's always been tough. The sister angle was the only thread I think they were trying to explain, but I'd rather have him just either go nuts and say, I'm just killing people because I want to just go home.
Where was the religious aspect in Halloween 1? You're saying it came from a religious family.
Well, it's implied. I mean, there's a cross on the wall. I mean, they don't really bring it up, but I always took it, I guess, mentally in my head, I interpreted it as that's how he took it, was he killed his sister because she was, getting wild and busy in the home. And, he didn't approve of that. Again, that might just be my own mind filling in blanks too, but that's just the way I took it because of some of these other horror films, being morality plays. Whenever someone's sinning, the killer kills someone. I mean, Friday the 13th is all about that.
I was just gonna say, I just think like the whole idea of Halloween works better when there isn't really a motive. He just, something
He's the
snapped,
boogeyman.
something snapped. His sister was there. He killed her. And like when he escaped in the first one, I imagine, he doesn't have a plan. And it's when Lori and her friends confront him, he's like, well, I have my evening planned. Like having this like internal motivation, like this fucking compass pointing you north, like it's just makes the entire franchise fall apart. And then they try to explain that, and it is. But what were you gonna say, Ian?
Don't remember. Oh, I do remember. I liked the way this movie ends. I don't quite buy it. The whole idea of the evil being transferred. I'm not trying to wrap the show up, but I'm tired, so I want to get this out while I still remember it. But at the end of the film, little Jamie Lloyd, Daniel Harris, she touches Michael Myers' hand, and it's implied that something transfers there. This movie also owes a lot to Friday the 13th, the final chapter. Down to in the very beginning where the evil guy is strapped to a stretcher, a dead or in a vegetative state, and the hand drops down as a shock moment. At the end of the final chapter, after Tommy has killed Jason, he goes to hug his sister, and like he turns around and you see that the eyes go wide as if like he's going to be the next Jason. The same thing happens here where Jamie, I guess, stabs her mother to death while she's drawing a bath. What I wanted to bring up was the Tom Savini problem, famous makeup effects artist. He said that one of the reasons he always thought Halloween was kind of bullshit was in that famous John Carpenter establishing shot, the opening of Halloween, when you see everything through Michael Myers' point of view, it's at the height of an adult walking down a hallway, and yet it's like this little 5-year-old kid. They make the same mistake in this movie. It's little Jamie Lloyd, who's like 3 feet tall, and yet when she's walking down the hallway, she's like, almost bumping into the light fixtures.
It didn't bother me as much in the first one. I 100% agree. It didn't bother me as much in the first one, especially because up until the reveal, you don't know whose perspective you're in.
Right.
And I think they did say they got like the shortest cast member to do that panic glide shot. And it doesn't bother me as much because I feel like there's so much in shadow in the first Halloween in this house that I can kind of buy it. But it 100% bothers me in part 4. But then also like you bringing up like the final chapter, like neither one of these franchises are prestige franchises, but I would say between Friday the 13th and Halloween, I think most people consider like Halloween to be the slightly more like elegant of the two franchises. Cause like Friday the 13th is really just can be kind of grim and nasty. It's almost like crazy how much better Friday the 13th part 4 is compared to Halloween 4.
Yeah.
Like Halloween had the money behind it more so than Friday the 13th, and like fuck, that movie is so much better. Like Halloween 4, Friday the 13th 4 is like a masterpiece.
Friday the 13th 4 was again one of those things where they were doing something different with the franchise that you didn't expect, which was, worked in its case. It didn't work with Halloween. I personally wish they would have continued the anthology. Halloween 3 has grown on me a little bit more over the years, mostly because I have so many friends who just love and adore that film. And Tom, anyway, Tom Atkins, but he's just a sexy man. The Halloween franchise always has been kind of, while it's been, like you said, that kind of prestigious, at the same time, it's always seemed to be kind of the back burner horror franchise versus like the Jason and the Freddy, the other two. And then at this time in 88, they're starting to try to come up with new horror icons with which, yes, folks, a little spoiler, we'll be covering at least one of these later in the year. You had Pumpkinhead and Child's Play coming out at this time. So people are starting to try to look at more horror franchises to launch, successful or not. So then you got Halloween in there, still trying to like play keeping up with the Joneses. And as you mentioned, this is number 4. Friday the 13th has already had 7 out. Nightmare on Elm Street got a little bit of a late start, but they had 4, but they're in the middle of their Dream trilogy. So yeah, you get this one, which is trying to not only remind people of the original 2 films, which had been not out for a long time, but make up for the bad flack they got from the fan base for Halloween 3. So, it had a lot of weight to try to carry. So I could see why it tried to hit some of the same beats. And, some of the stuff worked. I wanted more of the townspeople going crazy. You have that wonderful scene, actually, where the cops show up just after Jamie Lloyd's, after her sister finds her. And, they find each other because they got separated. And she says she's being chased by the boogeyman, by Mike Myers. Cop shows up to take him with Loomis. And suddenly you have Mike Myers standing there. And another one. And another one. I loved that angle because it was just kids playing pranks. I'm like, I kind of liked.
That was a great scene.
It was a great scene. It sets you up and it shows you how batshit crazy Loomis is, because it was great that the sheriff was just about to shoot one of them. And they're like, no, we're just teenagers. But, I wanted to see more of that. The town kind of shooting innocents, not that I want to see innocent shot, but, the town kind of
comes out.
Yeah, it does. But the town losing its shit over Mike Myers, who's just walking home looking for the one girl, and half of the chaos going on in town is not him,
Well, if you love mob mentality, Mark, do I have a movie for you?
No, not Halloween Kills still, because what worked for me in Halloween 4 versus Halloween Kills was because I think it was just the way it was approached. I mean, for one, Loomis being crazy, I love crazy Loomis in this. The fact that at the end, when we get the Jamie has killed her mom, which we find out in 5, spoiler folks, attempted to kill, so you don't have hatred that she actually killed someone. According to she attempted to kill her mother. At the very end, when she comes out with the bloody knife and the clown suit reminiscent of the Mike Myers killing his sister, Loomis was ready to just pop 6 in her. He was just going to pop a cap in her.
He was ready. He's like, I've made this mistake before. Not gonna do it again. Well, Mark, I also like what you were saying too. Like, the mob mentality aspects in this film weirdly worked, and I think we're all from the Midwest. Like, these all feel like guys from the Midwest corner bar, whereas Anthony Michael Hall does not really, and it reminds me of back what I said when I was on your show talking about Halloween Kills. I think the biggest missed opportunity with Halloween Kills is not casting Robert Longstreet, who played Lonnie in Halloween Kills, as Tommy Doyle, because I think he would have made a lot of that dialogue, as poorly written as it was, work, because he is a significantly better actor. And I also believe that he's a dude who has not left this town and has just kind of been, fucked up from these memories. More so than Anthony Michael Hall, who just looks like he's just been pumping iron since that day, getting his body ready. He doesn't seem as traumatized as he says he is.
That would have been an interesting angle, is if Tommy Doyle had left the town, and had gone out and like written books and like was like maybe hosting a TV show about hunting serial killers, all playing up this trauma he had from 40 years ago, even though he was like adjacent to someone who experienced something. Then he comes back to the town and riles everybody up and kind of causes this chaos and is exposed to be a phony. There's a great story in there somewhere. But I think your idea about the actor who played Lonnie being that kind of barfly, the guy who was never able to leave town, riling up these folks. Yeah, I believe he would be at the same bar as these guys in Halloween 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. That was my biggest thing is like, Tommy's dialogue doesn't quite work, but I think out of a better actor, and nothing against Anthony Michael Hall, he's done some good shit, but like, I just think that other guy could have done it better, and it really just drove it home when I was watching Halloween 4 because, like, none of those guys were necessarily, they didn't speak enough to know whether or not they're good actors or not. But they just felt like dudes they pulled off the street, and I was like, "This works. This works." And like my favorite part of all of that is like when they finally, when Michael chases them all to that school, and they're like, and Jamie and her sister run out and be like, he's in there, and he's like, well, we saw what he did to the cop station. Let's leave this to professionals. And they like, oh, good. Oh, angry mob who realizes we're in over our head. What have we been doing? The booze is wearing off. Let's get the fuck out of here.
Well, but there's also a great point about motivation, because in Halloween Kills, it becomes everybody gets swept up in this evil dies tonight. They all believe they're going to go fight this supernatural, kind of force. Whereas in a Halloween 4, it's an escalation of everyone's hanging out at the bar. All of a sudden, the news comes in that the cops are imposing a curfew. Everybody has to leave and go home.
Oh, we have to stop drinking.
Yeah, right. But the guy's like, I'm going to call the cops. I'm not shutting down my bar without, a good reason. And then no one answers the phone. And so like, okay, let's go see what's going on at the police station. And they get there and there's been a massacre. And they're like, okay, so this psychiatrist is telling us that Michael Meyers is back. He's the guy who killed those, again, 16 people 10 years ago. And he's on the loose. Let's go find him.
Yeah.
And so and that leads to the drunken, possibly rage-fueled murder of the innocent guy, which I agree should have been, kind of tied up a little bit more. But then you get the Sheriff Meeker, who at one point leaves the house siege because he gets these reports on the radio of these fucking vigilantes running around.
It's all things considered a very well constructed script. And it's something. It's got the right amount of like Hollywood convenience, but not enough to the point where like there's plot holes because of it. Like there's just a lot of cause and effect in the script, which is what I really like. And it should be one of those things that you don't notice until you're sitting down like we are and kind of connecting all of the dots. There should never be a question about why someone is going somewhere or what their motivation is. I feel like there was a big part. Granted, they're in Halloween 4, they're driving around looking for Michael, but it started because of all these logical seeds that were planted. I feel like in Halloween Kills, they're just kind of going off and doing things without really a plan. Whereas this one, like, there's some logic behind it.
There is. The escalation is set up very well.
And the screenwriter, I was watching the making of on the Scream Factory disc with him, and he was talking about like it seems like where the things went wrong is the director, Dwight Little. He says like, well, I didn't want to acknowledge anything but the first film because that's the great one, and I'm trying to make the sequel to that one. It's like, okay, whatever, dude, you didn't, but I appreciate you trying. What I appreciate about Alan McElroy's script for this film is that he's like, okay, Halloween 1 happened, Halloween 2 happened. How can I tie that stuff in? And originally, like his beginning for the film was going to be, and I wish they would have shot this because it could have been really cool. It was going to be a slow tracking shot down a hospital hallway as the titles are rolling in, and then the hospital wall we're looking at would fucking explode, and you'd see Loomis's charred body explode out the wall, explaining how he survived in 2, that he got blasted through a wall. and then the Halloween music would cue up, and we'd cut to like years later and shit. I'm like, man, here's a guy who's trying to like, he respects the material that came before, even if it all doesn't work. He's like, how can I tie this stuff in? He just seems like a smart screenwriter, and just seeing the way that this script is crafted and the way that these things play out, you know, especially because it's like, okay, we have all of these characters. How do we get them in the house together? Well, okay, you know, you have the boyfriend who doesn't really want to be with that girl. He wants to go hang out with the slutty girl. Well, the slutty girl is, you know, this daughter of the sheriff. Well, of course, the sheriff has to find him and bring them all in this room together. And that's also where they have to get their drama out and have their fucking scenes with each other. And it's just, it's fucking really well put together, all things considered. I just don't think it's made very well. I want to see this movie remade from a better director.
I would say it's the direction that's the toughest part, because I do like the screenplay to this and how it escalates. This though too, take off the Halloween for the Halloween name altogether, and if you just change the antagonist, you still have the exposition of what happened, or you just change the name, say it's a different kind of shaped bean or whatever. This is actually a decent thriller, more so than your slasher horror film, the way it plays out. I mean, it plays out almost more like your older thriller, to where a lot of the horror is off screen, or you see the after effects or whatnot. You know, this is almost handled more as a thriller than the slasher origins that it came from. You know, but you're right. The script works. It's the direction. And what's the thing with the power? Why? What is with the power in this movie? We get the scene by the gas station. Power line explodes there, plus the phone. And then Meyers later on throws the work guy onto the power, plant, in the power plant area there, the whatever they call it, and explodes. It takes out power for the entire town. And what I loved about that is the minute the power went out in the town, it went ghost town. There was like nobody.
That is also a problem, because there's that scene where Rachel is running through like the backyard. She scales the fence and, you know, gets over the gate because I don't know if it's established that she saw Michael Myers. She saw somebody kind of in the shadows, and she kind of freaked out, because that was a matter of teleportation. If that was Michael Myers, he was just at the power station, which you get the feeling is like on the outskirts. So what's going on? But
he teleports onto the back of the truck. Anything's possible.
We will talk about that alien queen Sulaco bullshit in a minute. But okay, the thing is, okay, she's running through this backyard. It's a curfew has been imposed. Everyone's supposed to have gone home. There's all the lights. Well, yeah, all the lights are out, but you'd think that you'd see candles in windows, or people out on their porches, or something, like keeping
a jack-o'-lantern. Come on,
jack-o'-lantern. But the whole town is dead. It's, you know, the first Halloween you could say, okay, there's nobody home because maybe they're either out trick-or-treating or they're at Halloween parties or something. But in this movie,
or even relatively late, like.
Right, but people stay up late on Halloween, right? But in this film, everyone's supposed to be home, and yet it still has that abandoned street feeling. It just doesn't. It's kind of incongruous.
Couldn't pay for that many extras. They didn't have Halloween Kills money.
That's true. That's very true.
That's true.
Before we talk about the pickup truck and Michael Myers, wow, I do want to mention something. One of the big heartbreaks of this, because I was excited to see this movie when I was 11, because it had a great poster. That poster had the giant original William Shatner mask on it.
Yes, it does.
And in the film, we have this nonsense, and I'm pointing to on the screen. I think I heard that the original mask was like underneath Deborah Hill's bed or some nonsense.
Yeah, they dragged it out for Halloween, because they used the exact same mask in Halloween 2 that they had in the first movie. Because when they knew they were gonna make it, they were like, John's like, well, where's the mask? Deborah was like, I think it's under my bed. And they found it. And that's actually the reason why in Halloween 2 the mask looks stretched, because the guy who wore it in that in Dick Warlock, greatest name ever, his head was bigger, so it didn't quite fit him right. But no, it's like this has been a thing that they've been dealing with in every Halloween film, where they just cannot get the mask right. And if any of your listeners have the streaming service Shudder, there was a short-lived one season of a show called The Core, which is like a almost like a horror talk show.
Hmm.
But the first episode was kind of interesting because they had a Halloween mask expert on who had replicas made from the original molds of every single movie.
Was it Sean
Wow.
Clark?
Yes, it was Sean Clark.
All right, yeah.
Yeah, and he goes through the entire history of these masks, and even talks about the infamous blonde-haired Michael Myers that shows up in one shot in this movie.
Wow.
Mhm.
I'm glad you brought that up. But here's the thing: I understand there's a history of these masks, but I don't understand why. They show a lot of intricate, very well sculpted Halloween masks in this movie. Like when Jamie's in the drugstore and she sees all these crazy masks. So they had the ability to recreate the Michael Myers mask.
I feel
People
like
could have done it. I don't know why they went this cheap route, especially if they're going to have the icon on the post. It's kind of like in the Friday the 13th series. If you remember the VHS for part 5, that had that really cheap plastic looking hockey mask because it was fake Jason. Imagine all the other Friday the 13th movies, him walking around in that mask.
like and maybe I might be misremembering, and I might even be making this up. Who knows? But I feel like I remember someone involved in the production saying that they were trying to make the mask even more expressionless. I don't know. Maybe I'm misremembering, but yeah, it's just like, and what's sad is this is not even the worst of the
No,
masks.
it's not.
No.
It's not the worst of the masks.
If anything, like one of the things, like when the 2 new Halloween movies came out, like they automatically went up in my book a little bit just because, like, hey, shit, the mask actually looks decent. Hell, I'm in. That's actually one thing I gave Rob Zombie credit for. It's like, hey, the mask doesn't look bad in these movies. That looks pretty fucking good. Because like this is terrible. And then like the one shot of it being blonde, I know that's explained somewhere. I just don't remember the story.
Yeah, I actually saw that in the trivia that they were originally going to have it blonde, but then they went with the dark hair to try to go back to the way it was. People remember it as.
It's funny how that works.
Yeah, it's funny how that works.
Let's go with the way it was.
Let's just go with the way it was. Yeah, those masks that she sees when she's at the pharmacy, because we're in 1988, so basically the 5 and dime Midwest. I've been to Ben Franklin many times, so it felt like going to a Ben Franklin. But the masks they had there now, I'm like, dude, I want some of those masks. Some of those masks were just gnarly. But what's interesting is another connection. Ian, I don't plan these. Folks, I don't plan these. I just grab movies. Here's a little trivia, if you'll indulge me, folks. In late 1986, the Cannon Group, Golan and Globus, contracted producer Deborah Hill and director John Carpenter to work on a screenplay for a new Halloween film titled Halloween 4, as they were interested in optioning the rights, much like they did for Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. Cannon did not like the treatment that Carpenter and Hill turned in, ultimately decided not to produce the film. Shortly afterwards, Carpenter and Hill sold all their remaining interest in the Halloween series to producer Mustafa Akkad, who promptly developed this film with a completely new script fashioned around the 1980s slasher boom. So there's our canon link to last year's special series. I didn't even plan it, folks.
Did they explain? Do you know what that treatment was that
No.
Cannon turned down?
I want to read this. Like I'm a diehard John Carpenter fan, so I feel like I need to read it, especially because like I fucking love Carpenter. I love how and not even just talking about his movies. I just love how open he is about things. So like I want to know like what, because he was tired of Halloween at that point. I know it. He was tired by the time he finished the first one. I just want to see like what tired John Carpenter 1988 wanted, like what his Halloween would have been like. And one of my favorite stories I ever heard about John Carpenter was actually apparently on the set of the Fog remake, which he was producing. And like someone from like one of the like journal Fangoria or some shit said they're interviewing him. So he's like, so hey John, why aren't you directing this one? He goes, because I don't want to.
Carpenter's awesome. It's just, it reminds me of my favorite commentary on a movie. I don't listen to a lot of them, even though I have them on movies, and I should. But my favorite one is Big Trouble in Little China. If you've ever heard it,
Oh, it's a great commentary.
it's a great commentary because like over half the movie is these two friends catching up while recording this. They barely talk about the film. They're like, oh yeah, this happened. They're like, well, how the kids?
I know. At one point he goes, how's Wyatt doing? I'm like, oh shit, I know who that guy is now.
So I love Carpenter's attitude. Yeah, I would have loved to have seen or see what they drew up for Cannon Group.
If you get a chance to, his commentary that he does on the original Halloween with Jamie Lee Curtis is really funny because at first, because it's them like just a couple years ago. I want to say like when they first re-released it on Blu-ray, it was like when they did that digibook of it. And Carpenter's being his normal cagey Carpenter self. And Jamie Lee Curtis is like getting him out of that. And it's just really funny because like, because Carpenter's not talking through a portion of it. So when they're talking about like that opening tracking shot and Jamie Lee is like pretty much like, I remember when we were shooting this and it's like, and I remember you were doing invisible edits and Carpenter finally tunes in and be like, oh, he's like, we have invisible edits. How many invisible edits are there? And he's like, count them for me. So he's like making her do like filmmaking trivia. And she goes there. She's like, there's one right there. I'm like, okay, there's one. So he's just kind of being like a jerk, but like they've been friends forever type jerk.
That's awesome.
So
here's a scene I wish they would have left in actually. Mike coincidentally was looking for a new mask at the store. They cut this scene. At the same time, Jamie was there, and he grabs a Ronald Reagan mask and was going to try that on, but decides not to, throws it away, and grabs the bleached Shatner mask off the shelf. So apparently we were supposed to see him grab the new mask from the store.
And when he throws the mask away, who picks it up? Patrick Swayze.
Patrick Swayze. You had to bring Point Break into it, didn't you?
Of course. Young Patrick Swayze grew up in Haddonfield, Illinois. Then he split to California to go surfing and rob banks. Whoa. It works.
Yeah, I'd watch it.
I'd watch it. Yeah.
I want to before I forget. I mentioned the Alien Queen. There's a scene during the climax of this movie. The rednecks are on the road. Bunch of armed dudes in the truck along with Rachel and Jamie.
Pure cinema.
Yes.
Okay, so did Michael Myers, he was like hanging on to the undercarriage of the truck. Did he get a face full of exhaust, which wouldn't have like discolored his mask? He climbs up on the back of the truck. He starts murdering people. There is clearly a shot where there's a guy who's got a shotgun who's facing forward as two of his friends are being brutally murdered, like right behind him, and he doesn't turn to like, huh?
Not even behind him. The second guy that Mike Myers offs is next to him. He literally grabs and bumps into the guy who's looking at
like honestly. So this movie came out years before the movie I'm about to reference, but as I was watching that scene, I was like, man, how cool would it have been if they go to shoot Michael Myers and then it becomes like a T-1000 thing where it's like his face is like blows away, but then all comes back. And that explains like how he's been like catching, I don't know, that can you imagine just like the ballsiness of something like that? It probably would have been terrible, but fuck.
I think that's what this movie is missing. I mean, because as much as I love Donald Pleasance, as much as I love Donald Pleasance as Dr. Loomis, by this point, it's just shtick. That every time Loomis opens his mouth, it's not going to be anything smart. It's going to be like that fake profound that evil is here. They don't know what they're fighting. Maybe nobody knows how to stop it. Like, dude, just what are you doing?
It's not a bad Pleasance, actually.
No,
that was.
Thank you.
That's impressive.
Yay! But my point is,
you're right.
I love him. Like he's awesome in the first movie. Again, I don't remember much about the second one, but in this one,
he's actually not bad in the second one. Like he's trying, considering how much he hated doing these movies. Like the first two one, he's not bad. And he has little moments in some of the later ones where he's not bad. The less he has to move, better.
Just like Michael Myers.
Yeah.
Well, that's what was funny is you get that scene too at the gas station where he confronts Myers, and someone's got to explain to me. I had this problem even in the early films. He was what, 10 when he killed his sister,
Give or take,
or 8, 10. He was 10, like 10ish. Needless to say, he was not driving age at all. When did Mike Myers learn how to drive? Because he drives a car.
Well, I imagine
he didn't look on the internet and Google it.
I imagine he sent a letter every week to get funds to build a library, very much like Andy Dufresne, so that way he can get a book and learn how to read, learn how to drive a car from a book.
The Smiths Grove Redemption. I like that.
I imagine like by the time he got to Haddonfield, he was pretty decent at it. But I'm sure like those like 50 miles before Haddonfield was a lot of like starting and stopping and trying to get a feel for like how you use the pedals.
Oh, but then it was an automatic too, and then the truck is a shift. So how the hell did he?
They have a really extensive library. They also have some Hank Williams albums.
They got some Hank Williams albums. No, that's what always just I understand. It's just movies, whatever. But it just always got me. I'm like, he's been a kid in the asylum forever, and he manages to just pop in a car and he's driving to Haddonfield, and he knows where it is. He doesn't have a map, but he knows where it is too. I mean,
evil doesn't need a map.
No, but evil dies tonight.
Could I just say, like, since we were talking about the first Halloween, one of my favorite little moments in that film is when the guy who runs the asylum was like, well, he doesn't know how to drive a car, and Loomis is like, well, he was doing fine last night, and then he leaves, and he was parked in a handicap spot.
That's how you know he's pure evil.
That's how you know he's pure evil.
Yeah, like I just love the little things that Loomis does in that movie just show that he is just as nuts. He's parked in a handicap spot. The only time he smiles in that movie is when he scares a child.
Yeah,
pretty much.
He's pretty nuts himself.
Well, and then there's the kids too in Haddonfield. Man, they're nothing but brats, I tell you. We get Jamie here, who's just trying to go to school, and you've got your group of bullies who are freaking harsh. Holy balls, are they? I mean, I've been bullied in school when I was young, but damn.
Jamie's an orphan. Jamie's an orphan.
Bullies in movies are so much worse.
It got me. But then later on, because she wasn't going to do the Halloween thing, well, then she changes her mind and she's going to do the Halloween costume. She meets up with the same kids. They're like, oh, hey, that's a great costume. Hey, you want to go with us? And they go trick or treat. And it's like,
Well, she was wearing a mask. So they didn't know it was her.
I attributed that to the fact that like kids are shitty to each other except when an adult is around.
Oh, that
so
could
Rachel
be,
was with her at that point, like, oh, you great costume. Speaking of shitty behavior, that scene in the drugstore where Jamie thinks she I guess she does see Michael Myers, or she thinks she does, and then she falls into a mirror, breaks it, and then Rachel hears her collapse, runs over to her, knocks dramatically over this spinner of greeting cards, and then she just picks up Jamie and says, come on, let's go home. I'm like, I'm sorry, no, you're gonna pay for this or clean this? Like, nobody says anything.
It's a small town. No. It's fine.
So
look, Kathleen Kinmont playing Kelly. My God, I was gonna say that's KKK, but she would have, at least, because she didn't like Rachel very much, she would have said something like, excuse me. All right.
One scene that's like it's always bothered me. Like, there's just like, this is a scene that's always bothered me in this movie. So when we first get that first scene of Jamie and she's in her bedroom by herself, and like she gets like these flashes of Michael Myers, how the fuck does she know who he is at this point? It's always bugged me. She doesn't know who he is. She has no connection to him yet, but she's seeing him like appear from behind her bed and his reflection in the mirror, and she like, how does she like?
That doesn't make any sense unless it is some kind of like the way that she connects to him at the end. If this is supposed to be some really not well established connection to evil, because she's seeing him in a mask that he doesn't even have yet. So
Yes.
maybe it's like she can see, it's kind of like the Force. You can see the present and the future and things that happened and things that haven't happened or might be. It's all bullshit, but that's the only thing I can attribute it to.
It gets explained. This is another one of those, and this is why I'm reserving my full judgment of just how much I like or don't like Halloween Kills. Is the movie after it. In Halloween 5, there's more of the psychic link between Meyers and
none of that was planned when they
well,
made
no, I'm just saying though that I wonder if they came up with that partly to help explain the earlier stuff, because how does she know unless she read news articles and stuff about her mom? And they never even really go into how her mom and her dad died. It's like, because in 10 years since the previous events of Halloween 2, Jamie, Laurie Strode got married, got pregnant, had a kid who's 8, so it had to be 2 years after the events and she died at some point
11 months ago.
Yeah, 11
when the movie
months
picks
prior.
up.
Yeah.
It's always weird because they never really explain what's going on there. As far as Jamie Lloyd and that whole thing, maybe those visions she had were implants from the Thorn cult.
Yeah, which comes up.
I can't say shit about the Thorn cult. I have the tattoo and shit. So. Yeah.
Nice.
Wow.
Yeah. I wanted at the time. So a friend of mine was doing tattoos and was wondering how to do it, and I wanted a small little tattoo that was a reference to the Halloween franchise, but is only nerdy enough that people who really like the Halloween franchise will get. So like I even have that on the same wrist, pointing the same direction and shit.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, but here's a question, not to demean your tattoo, but
demean it all you want.
Aren't people who are really into the Halloween franchise not that big a fan of the Thorn cult?
Probably.
They might understand it, but it's like, I get that. I love Jar Jar Binks. No, sorry.
And I know we're going a little long. We'll wrap it up here soon, but there's one other scene that I think is actually rather important and interesting. I actually took
and then before we wrapped up too, I also want to challenge you guys to do for something. But
okay,
continue.
I'm not getting a Thorn tattoo.
Not yet.
Touche.
Go ahead, Mark. Sorry.
The scene where Loomis, because he gets left in the dust, he's walking. He thinks these teenagers are going to give him a ride. They drive off. So then this crazy priest,
classic teenagers,
oh, bye, old man. Leave him in the dust, and up into this old truck comes this old priest who picks up Loomis, guy older than Loomis. Loomis, you think is going to be the oldest guy in the? Nope. We have this priest
who, by the way, also calls him old man.
Calls him old man, and he's drinking and driving because he's putting his faith in
Jesus, take the wheel.
Jesus, take the wheel. But I love the conversation that they have in there, because he talks about how he's hunting the apocalypse, and Loomis.
Oh, I wanted more of that old
agrees. Guy. I wanted more of this old priest. I found him fascinating. The whole line of "you can't kill damnation" isn't awesome. It's like.
That's better than Evil Dies Tonight.
It is. It's better than Evil's Die. But what's even more is that I love it, and maybe it's me making lakes out of puddles, but you almost see what Loomis could become if he continues his obsession with Michael, is this old priest, because this old priest talks about he's been hunting down, the apocalypse for 30 years, and he's never quite, and he realizes you can't kill damnation, but he's still hunting it. And I'm like, that's kind of like Loomis. I mean, he knows evil on two legs is Mike Myers. You can't really kill evil, yet he still pursues Mike regardless.
But, unlike other cautionary tales, that priest seems like something that Loomis could aspire to, because he's like happy and stuff. Like Loomis is on the verge of being a broken old man because of his obsession. That priest, he's got it going on.
He's singing
Right. But that scene with the teenagers, if this had been a bit of a harder, meaner movie, Loomis had that gun. I could have like he got up to the car, not that saying he should have shot them. He's like, okay, fuckers. He like forces them all out of the car and leaves them behind, and he takes the car and drives to Haddonfield, and probably spares their life in the course of it.
Shoots the car. He's like, I got your evil rated.
Yeah. Evil drives tonight.
Evil drives tonight. It drives a stick. Hey, it's driving a tow truck. Maybe it could give me a pull out of the ditch. You know, what did you want to challenge us with?
So we've kind of already talked about it, but on my show, the Shameless Picture Show, we always try to, because it has happened where me and Nick just don't like a movie very much, and we always force each other to find something we legitimately really liked about a movie and why we would recommend it to someone. So while we've definitely talked about a lot of things we don't like and a couple of things we liked, unless there's something else you want to end on, Mike, I always like to end on something positive.
Oh no, I always love
because I think a challenge because it's I think we all listen to a lot of movie related stuff, and it's very easy for some shows just to be negative all the time. And not saying that's what this case was, but just in general. So I always like to end on something positive and find something you really liked about the movie, even if you didn't really like the movie. Because it's always been my opinion that if there was one good scene, it wasn't a waste of time.
One of the things we try to do on the spoiler room, and I think we've been fairly successful outside of maybe one or two films, is always try to keep it somewhat positive, at least to where it's not a complete slam fest. I've always tried not to, except for Vacation, that remake movie. Fuck that movie. It can die and burn in a pile of festering snot. Anyway, but other than that movie, the latest Vacation, Ian, why don't you go first?
It's great for 11-year-olds.
That barely counts, but okay. It's not wrong.
Yeah, there you go.
I can see that. You're not wrong. This is actually, I mean, even there's the implied nudity, but not actual full on nudity that you've gotten in other slasher films. It's kind of mostly implied, a little shadowy, a little covered, but this would be preteen gateway horror. You could make this a gateway horror film, I think.
Yeah, it scared the shit out of me when I was younger, and it's not even that scary of a movie.
No, but you don't have really a lot of, outside of the one very brief it is too, throat rip, you really don't have anything too major happening on screen. A lot of it's in the shadows, on the dark. Even the bloody corpses are covered in shadows.
Although I will say it's kind of nasty because Meyers uses his thumb to great effect during two kills in this movie. One goes through an ambulance attendant's forehead, and the other goes through another guy's like cheek. The guy on the stairs. Bad stuff. So that was cool. That's positive. I like that. I like the thumbs. Michael Myers is all thumbs.
All thumbs.
Let's see. The one true good thing I liked actually was, I mentioned it before, I didn't hate this film. In all honesty, I enjoy it. As we mentioned, it's fine. I don't think anyone here like regrets like, oh my God, this was just a drudge to watch. It's not. There's a lot of interesting elements in here. I will say I really enjoyed the priest and Loomis conversation, only because, and one of the reasons I think it stuck out with me, especially watching it this time, not just because I'm old, but it's the first time where someone was talking with Loomis and they didn't miss a beat with the way he was talking. Like the sheriffs, they're like, oh great, here comes crazy Loomis, and then they don't quite believe him. Oh, he's going on about Mike Myers again. He's going on a bender. Fine, we'll go and check, But here's this priest is just like, oh yeah, I'm doing the same thing. Yeah. I mean, he doesn't miss a beat, and it's a wonderful conversation between these two. And it's the first time we've seen up until that point in the film where people don't look at,
it's the first person who does it. Yeah, it's the first person who doesn't think he's crazy because he's just as crazy, if not more so.
Right.
Well, it's a great observation, Mark, because it's also the first time in these movies that we've seen where Loomis doesn't look absolutely exasperated talking to someone else.
And actually, if anything, what's great about that scene is like like Loomis is kind of looking at him as like, okay, Captain Goofy.
Yeah.
Like Loomis, now you know how everyone else feels around you.
Right? And that guy, he's not phased. That old grizzly priest who's probably seen a lot of shit. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing too. This guy has a small role, but you feel like this guy has seen some things. Even though Loomis has, it's like this priest has been through a lot. And I love that scene. That scene was actually rather endearing because it was just these guys talking and first time Loomis did get the crooked eye, like, oh, he's just kind of here, as for show. He's not really here officially anymore. They were playing him off as Loomis is just kind of the crazy, token guy. And this guy's just talking to him. They're just shooting the shit about chasing damnation, and they're crazy.
Mhm.
And for me, I really liked that. That was a character moment we get from Loomis. That's something other than crazy obsessed, evil on two legs. You don't know what you're fighting. He's evil. Oh, look at the evil,
Hmm.
So I guess that for me is what it is. So what about you, Mike? I know you said
So there's three things that I kind of respond to in this film. One, I really like the relationship between Jamie and Rachel.
mhm.
I kind of like, while Rachel was never like downright, other than that one scene where she really didn't want to babysit Jamie, she was never like really downright shitty. But it was I kind of liked her little arc of truly feeling like she had to protect Jamie,
Mhm.
because I feel like I feel like it'd be very easy for her to be like, "You're not my real family, bye," just fucking leaving her, and she didn't do that, which was cool. I really like the way that this film kind of opens up the world of Haddonfield. Like
Mhm.
this one feels more like the Midwest than I think any of the other ones.
Mhm.
Truly, like the way the neighborhoods are laid out in the houses. At one point, Rachel's like walking down an alley, and it's the most Midwestern feeling alley that I've ever seen, other than
Yeah.
maybe the alleyway in Halloween 2, where he's
Yeah.
like they have this amazing tracking shot down an alley in Halloween 2. Um, and I just like the feeling of the town. Like I said, it just feels, other than it being completely fucking empty, it feels like a Midwestern town.
Mhm.
Um, and Halloween 5 also, and I think even 6 also shoot in the same area, but they do a way poorer job at framing out the mountains of Salt Lake City. So me and Amanda always joke about the Great Mountain Range of Illinois. Amanda being my wife. And then it's always hard to talk about like music for these films because it's a lot of the same. But I really like that Alan Howarth kind of takes
Mhm.
the reins from Carpenter and manages to make something that's simultaneously faithful to what Carpenter had established in the first two films, but then it's still quite good.
Oh yeah.
Like on the
No.
surface, like, oh, look, there's the Halloween theme, there's the music we all know, but he's doing some really interesting things and manages to breathe a lot of life into this film. And then I also, watched it in surround sound, and
Mhm.
the way that the music kind of envelops you is really interesting. And actually, I guess this is a fourth thing for all of you audiophiles out there. The movie has a really nice sound mix to it,
Mhm.
and I looked up a lot of the guys who worked on the post production sound of this film, and they would also go on to do films like Platoon and shit. So like they had some big heavy hitters in terms of
Yeah.
doing like interesting like Dolby stereo surround mixes
Mhm.
for this film. So like if you're a surround sound nut like I do, this is a really pleasing sonic experience and probably one of the better sounding of the Halloween
I'm
films.
I'm glad you brought that up because on my It's Vinylly Mine, where I did the 12 vinyl in 12 days, a couple of them I did were Carpenter scores where Alan Howarth was a collaborator with it. So if you're going to get someone who takes over a score for a John Carpenter series, you'll want this guy because he worked on with him on Escape from New York and Christine. Both
Hmm.
he's credited with. So again, if you're going to have a guy take over Halloween music, why not a guy who's worked with?
I actually met Alan Howarth and I got him to sign my copy in my Halloween 2 vinyl.
Oh,
And
nice.
I asked him, just, I
Yeah.
always try to find some sort of unique question
Mhm.
for whenever I get a chance to meet some of these people. And I said to him, I was like, well, you've worked with John Carpenter a lot. What's the best piece of advice he's ever given you?
Mhm.
And he said, He's like, when I first met John Carpenter, I was pretty new to doing soundtracks. And he said, Carpenter taught me that he said, music in a film should be a silk glove, soft to the touch.
Nice. And
That's
you
nice.
can see that in a lot of Carpenter. You can hear that, excuse me, in a lot of Carpenter's scores, actually,
Yeah.
and depending on the movie, of course. But you know, I was listening to, not to go too far in a tangent, but I was listening to the Escape from New York vinyl.
I'm just hoping that as you talk, we can get Ian to fall asleep. Like,
No, I know. No, we'll finish up here because I know Ian's tired. He's had a long
4
day.
a.m. guys. No.
Yes, I know. I got
5
4
a.m. Get over it.
I got 4 a.m. tomorrow.
That was sleeping in, by the way. Sorry.
But listening to like his Escape from New York score, it sounded very similar with what he did for They Live in many respects. You know, Carpenter's style like that. So that makes sense with the silk glove because they're not always complicated scores, but they're definitely interesting to listen to, and they wrap the film very well, especially some of the scenes. You know, Alan Howarth with Halloween 4, he brings back some of those cues and such that Carpenter had in, you know, the first films, but he also makes it his own.
Yeah.
You know, you still have the
You know, he's not necessarily doing like the Harry Manfredini like Friday the 13th thing where he's legitimately just ripping himself off over and over again.
Yeah.
You know, he takes the music that was established and expands it.
He expands it, does re-instrumentation. You still get that kind of you know, the Mike Meyers stepping, what I call the stepping tone, where you in the first couple especially you have that heavy dun.
Yeah,
you know,
I knew exactly what you meant.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And here he does it, but it doesn't have quite. It didn't sound like it quite had as much that heavy bass like in the previous versions. It's still there. It's still that rhythm, but there's a few tracks in here where he does it, but it's not as prominent, as heavy as it was. You know, he's not banging on the piano for that chord quite as hard. At least it seemed to me in some scenes. But again, could be my tinnitus too. But with that,
but one other quick thing that I liked,
and
I forgot about this, but at the end of this movie, Rachel is catatonic. The hero who has rescued Jamie, and you know, there's this nice reunion back at the house. She's just sitting on the couch, and
she's checked out.
She's completely. She's completely. It's not like a lot of these slasher movies where everything's kind of fine, and she's like comforting Jamie, saying, "Yeah, the boogeyman's gone" or whatever. She's like, there's some real world trauma there, but also the fact that Sheriff Meeker has not yet discovered what has happened to his daughter. He's still back at the house, like preventing Loomis from blowing Jamie's head off. But that's another, you know, that's something that we got in like the Rob Zombie movies with the, you know, Daniel Harris playing the sheriff's daughter who ends up, you know, getting horribly killed, I think, in the second one. So yeah, it's just a nice, there's these things that are kind of left, not necessarily for a sequel, but just kind of left untied for the audience to imagine.
You mentioning that moment in, I think it was Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 of like the sheriff's react. It still guts me. Like that is such a good, well executed scene. But
Brad Dourif, man.
Yeah. So, well, thank you, gentlemen. This has been fun. Thank you for our live tune-in listeners. We've had a number of people jump in and out tonight. And I'm doing something a little different before we end the night and before we do the license to shill. Okay, pick one category. And we're going to have Michael pick the category tonight. Comedy classics, action movies, or Oscar winners?
Comedy classics.
Comedy classics. All right, here we go.
I will say I'm still action movies are a bit of a blind spot for me, especially a lot of the 80s ones. So
I got a Christmas gift, the big movie quiz. And so we're going to end the episodes with a trivia question every night from this big movie quiz, because why not? Damn it, it's my show. Okay, so here we go. Ian, pick one or two.
Two.
All right. Oh, fucking.
The answer is Freddy got fingered.
No.
Every answer in that book should be Freddy got fingered.
Oh, great. Now I forgot who I put on here, the Freddy Got Finger fan club. Anyway, what is the name of Daniel Craig's character in Knives Out?
Pierre Blanc?
A foghorn leghorn.
No. Both wrong. You were close. It's actually Benoit Blanc. So haha. So there's 2 questions on every card. That's why I had you pick 1 or 2, Ian.
All right.
So there you go.
I like this.
So that's how we'll end it. And now, as always, the final nail in the coffin for our first 4 on the floor in our first episode.
So back to Halloween 4.
2022. License to Shill, folks. So Mike, please, License to Shill. You mentioned your podcast. Please, the floor is yours.
So I've been hosting a podcast for the last 5 years called the Shameless Picture Show. I'm gonna steal Mark's catchphrase. We're small but mighty. We're about to start our 6th season. We're on a little mid-season break at the moment. You can find us on www.shamelesspictureshow.com. My website. My wife made that website. We're on pretty much all major streaming platforms. I think we just got an Audible and Amazon or something. Oh, I did just find out that we are on some weird Portuguese podcasting website that somehow is higher on the Google search than my actual website, which is kind of great. But no, we have some great episodes. Some of the highlights being back in season 1, I believe we did a very long episode on Rocky, where my co-host had never seen it. And then to top that episode off, I get an exclusive interview with Lloyd Kaufman talking about working on Rocky. I get him to talk just about his friendship with John G. Avildsen and Rocky.
Nice.
We have a 3-hour episode on Cannibal Holocaust where I sit down with the promoter of Mondo Lucha Wrestling in Wisconsin to talk about Cannibal Holocaust.
Wow.
And then for my 100th episode, I have Andre Gower from the Monster Squad on. And you can hear me cry, so that's a fun one. It's just like just nostalgia cries. So doing that, like I've been doing that. We'll be starting our 6th year. Me and my co-host Nick Richards. On top of that, I also am a filmmaker a little bit on the side. I'm working on a music video currently for a local band called The Directionals that should be out hopefully within the next month or so. And yeah, you can also find me on TikTok, which feels super weird, but
It is.
I took a page off of Mark's book, and like seriously, like one video of me unboxing something has gotten more listens than my last episode of the podcast. What the
right?
So
I know.
So I moved all my physical media reviews over to TikTok. I'm also on Letterboxd. I've already got like 5 movies for the year. 2 of them are short, so that barely counts, but whatever.
There you go. And Mr. Ian Simmons, those few who may not know where your stuff is, shame on you folks. Please, the floor is yours.
I'm going to drag this out so that we can officially end on the same running time as Halloween 4.
Oh, boy.
No, I'm Ian Simmons. I run Kicking the Seat, which you can find at kickseat.com. I also have a YouTube channel, which is where I do most of my stuff, movie reviews, interviews, roundtables, live shows about Marvel projects. Go to YouTube and look up Kicking the Seat, and we'd love to have you subscribe and watch and enjoy and comment and all that other stuff. I'm also taking a page from Mark and not listening to advice. I am reading the comments, and I've started making videos about reading the comments that I receive. I've got another one in the works. Unfortunately, people keep commenting on stuff, which didn't ever used to happen. Now I just can't stop. I'm like, please stop giving me feedback. So I got to get on the ball.
Too late now. Now you've started the snowball.
Seriously.
Well, definitely check out Michael's stuff. Check out Ian's stuff.
I literally just subscribed to your podcast as you were sitting here talking.
Awesome.
So there you have it, folks. Please, yes, check out Michael's and Ian's stuff. And if you're interested at all, our other stuff on our website, the Special Mark Productions. I've got 2 reviews coming up. We're doing 4 on the floor. Next week is Hellraiser Bloodlines. So Pinhead in space. Can't wait to talk about that. We're the
4th one they sent him to space. They waited no time.
No, they didn't. And then, of course, our Horror of '88, which kind of inspired this month, kicks off with their inaugural special episode, which will be Nightmare on Elm Street 4, and we're finishing it off with Friday the 13th 4. So it should be an interesting month here. Keep it here, folks. Check out our Patreon if you want to tell me what you would like to see on our channel. And yeah, thank you so much for listening. And now we'll just say a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Evil
dies tonight.
no drives. It drives.